Hey there, folks. Welcome back. As I hope I mentioned today is Super Tuesday. Yes, it's Tuesday. And yes, I'm feeling super, but that's not why I say it's Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday is a term of art. It is a term used for what is happening today in America because there are all the primaries in all these different states. And to discuss this, we got a super guest, Gavin Wax. He's the head of the New York Young Republicans. Gavin, welcome back.
Great to be back with you, Eric. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and by the way, I should mention the other day you were at the Socrates in the City event. Um, it was I don't even know what to say. It seemed like an amazing evening to me. We haven't put it up on the web yet, but I was just so glad to see you there.
It was fantastic. This was my first Socrates in the City event. I think you were in fine form, holding court. I got to see you in your natural environment, natural habitat. It was a great discussion with a friend of mine, James O'Keefe, who
Yeah.
discussed, his work over the years and all the work he's continuing to do to, fight for transparency and uncover corruption in all our various institutions. And of course, I certainly enjoyed the nice dinner that you also provided after. That definitely tied things together nicely.
Yeah, no, it's the Socrates events. They're amazing. They're all different. James O'Keefe is such a hero. My introductions are usually mostly goofy. I'm pretty sure I used the word pimp 17 times because I was forced to count. But anyway, folks, you can see that it'll be up soon. We'll be editing it. If you're a member of Socrates Plus, I think you can, yes, you can see it right now, the whole unedited version with James O'Keefe. If you're a member, if you sign up for Socrates Plus, it is available to you. It goes away, I guess, in 2 days, it goes away. But we have the unedited version up of Socrates Plus. If you go to Socrates in the City, you can see, sign up for Socrates Plus. It's obviously very cheap, but you have to be signed up to see most of the stuff we have on there, including the unedited, the unbowdlerized, uncensored version of the James O'Keefe interview with my strange introduction. So you have to go to SocratesandCity.com. Okay, Gavin Wax, today is Super Tuesday. Many people in my audience are not, political junkies. So what is Super Tuesday for those unaware?
Super Tuesday is a block of 15 states all heading to the polls at the same time for the presidential primary. It's significant because, up until now, we've been discussing a state at a time, whether it's Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, most recently, the District of Columbia, which we can get into shortly. Not a state, but certainly voting. And Super Tuesday presents an opportunity basically to wipe the field clean once and for all. It's a massive amount of delegates are up for grabs by the presidential contenders. And obviously, the polls have shown one thing, and they've made one thing very clear, that President Trump is a dominant force in this primary. Up until now, he's had slightly more competitive states. South Carolina, he was facing the former governor, Nikki Haley, in New Hampshire. Both New Hampshire and South Carolina, both being open primary states where you have a lot of Democrats and crossover voters coming in to influence the results. New Hampshire tends to be a little bit more on the moderate to liberal side of the spectrum. And then obviously Iowa, you had a large evangelical vote, which has historically gone against President Trump, supposedly, with Cruz in 16, but also DeSantis had a big play there. But now those early states have pretty much given way to this massive block of 15, very geographically spread out, where President Trump is set to dominate and really just push his numbers in
I
terms
just
of.
want to be clear to give Nikki Haley a fair shake. She won in the District of Columbia, and she is hoping to crush it in Cuba and North Korea. So I think she still has a chance. If the communists will just get out there and vote for Nikki Haley, anything can happen. But today is Super Tuesday, so we don't need to mention all the states. What is your sense of what's going to happen tonight?
I think it's going to be a clean sweep tonight. I think President Trump will be winning, commanding majorities in all of the states that are contested, and obviously the results will trickle in. We're dealing with different time zones, but I think it's just going to further cement what already has been cemented as a clear electoral landslide for the president in this primary. This is just going to continue what we've seen, with the exception of D.C., which in many ways was sort of a beautiful moment. Of course, Nikki Haley wins the lobbyists and the kleptocrats and the technocrats and all the other.
Don't you find it funny? I mean, it's the ultimate badge of shame that the only thing that you win is the District of Columbia. I mean, it's a badge of shame that you couldn't make up. It's like a Babylon Bee article that she would win the District of Columbia. It's like saying that she won Cuba, 80 points ahead in Cuba and North Korea. Congratulations, Nikki Haley. I mean, I have to say that it must. I hope it makes her at least a little uncomfortable. It's just delightful to me that she won in DC.
Well, it certainly shows where her base is, and it's not really the grassroots. It's not really the base of the Republican Party. It's not the working men and women of this country. It's not the forgotten men and women of this country. Those are the people that President Trump and his uplifting message of making America great again actually appeal to. No, her base are the board members of Boeing and the other military-industrial complex. Surrogates that live in the DC and the surrounding area of the Beltway. So it just goes to show how out of touch her support is. It's based on the donor class. It's based on the consultant class. It's not really a true coalition of Republican and conservative voters. But listen, I think this contest is all but over. She can continue to drag it out. She can continue to embarrass herself. I've said recently that her campaign resembles a kamikaze fighter pilot from the 1940s. It's instead of a plane, it's her campaign, and it's going straight into the ocean. Her electoral promises and prospects after this election are withering by the day. The longer she stays in as a threat or a counterbalance to President Trump, who no one's looking for that except a select few of the most committed never Trumpers. So she's really losing all of her potential future prospects with every passing day.
Well, it's so interesting because if you think of Vivek Ramaswamy, you think of Governor Ron DeSantis, if they had won, they really had an agenda very similar to Donald Trump's. And the reason they didn't win is because people thought, well, we think Trump can do Trump better than they can do. But the difference with Nikki Haley is that she is the anti-Trump. She is on the different side from Vivek, from Ron DeSantis, who maybe they're not Trump, but their policies were more MAGA than not. It's a strange thing to have this outlier figure of Nikki Haley. Who is she fighting for? I mean, is it for Jeb Bush, for Liz Cheney? It's just strange to me that she's out there fighting. Obviously, people are throwing money at her, people who hate Trump, and I would argue hate America.
Yeah, I think she's fighting in terms of the last, Hail Mary of a dying establishment, a dying old guard that are being replaced with every passing year by a sort of America First coalition that President Trump ushered onto the American body politic when he came down the escalator in 2015. I think, the good thing about this all is that her results and her polling have sort of quantified the percentage of the party that still remains committed to those neoconservative, moderate positions of old. I think, she's been benefiting from a lot of contests where Democrats and independents can vote in. But really, if you look at the actual percentage of Republicans, I don't think she's really anywhere outside of the 10 to 15% range. I mean, this is the party of President Trump. And you even said it best when you related to both Vivek and Ron DeSantis. Say what you want about them, their personalities or their campaigns. I think it's fair to say that many of the platform points that they were pushing, many of the policy areas they were pushing, were generally aligned with President Trump's America First populist agenda. So if you add their percentages up in this primary, you add President Trump's with it, you're over 85, 90% of the Republican electorate. So if anything, this contest, this primary has just showcased what a pathetic percentage of the electorate the neoconservative establishment can really claim as their own. They are representing a dwindling minority, and it dwindles further by every day. And without Democrats voting for them, without the institutional support that they still cling on to, they would have been gone a very long time ago.
Well, it's fascinating to go back to 2016. Donald Trump picks Nikki Haley to be his ambassador to the UN. He picks many, many people who we now know are the enemies of Donald Trump and middle America. He picked them because if you can ever say it of Donald Trump, this is the case, he was naive. You don't think of him as naive, but he was naive. He had no idea, no one really did, of the forces arrayed against him, and against, the most Americans' idea of America. But Nikki Haley was there, so many others that he picked. When we come back, I want to talk about that a little bit, because the question is, if and when Trump wins, and by God's grace, I hope he does, or I think America's done. The question is, what will he do differently with the 4 years that God gives him, that the American people would give him, than he did in the previous 4 years, where he was genuinely hamstrung, not literally, but genuinely hamstrung from doing the will of the people. We'll be right back talking to Gavin Wax. Don't go away. Welcome back, talking to Gavin Wax. He's the head of the New York Young Republicans. I'm a New York Republican, but I'm not that young anymore, and that's why we have Gavin here. So, Gavin, I was just talking about in 2016, Trump picked Nikki Haley and others in his administration, and it was really, I think, generous of him. He's sort of reaching out to people that maybe weren't on the same page as he was exactly, but he thought, let's work together. And it backfired because he didn't realize he's letting trouble inside the tent. I remember I was actually, the morning before he was inaugurated, there was a service at the church across the street from the White House, and I was graciously invited, and I was in that room, and there were a host of people in that room, including Nikki Haley. I spoke with her briefly. None of us could have dreamt then where things were going, that all of these people, some of them, I literally sat next to General Flynn during the church service, and none of us could have dreamt what would be unfolding in the weeks and months ahead. We kind of thought, this is an exciting moment for America. America has picked Donald Trump, but he was, as I said earlier, hamstrung, prevented from doing what he might have done. Are you of the opinion that he has learned sufficiently from what he went through since 2016 to govern differently in 2020?
Absolutely, but I also think it's important to put some context here. I think President Trump, just from a personality perspective, he's a forgiving guy. He's a nice guy. He wants to give people second chances, maybe to a fault. And I think when he came in 2016, he was really looking forward to bringing the party together, to bringing the country together, working even with Democrats, working with different factions within the Republican Party. He's a businessman by nature. He was trying to bring people together, cut deals, and sort of bring about a national unity that we haven't had in quite some time. So I can't fault him for that. I can't fault him for having that perspective, that mentality. I think the other issue is that he represented an ideological movement a little bit ahead of his time. He was representing this sort of new and upcoming, this emerging, ascendant sort of populism in the United States. And frankly, there just simply wasn't the infrastructure that existed at the time to really staff an administration that was aligned with that. You still had a lot of more libertarian leaning think tanks. You had a lot more establishment, moderate, neoconservative leaning groups. So the talent pool was limited, mostly because he was so ahead of the curve. And I also think he simply did want to build bridges and kind of create a sort of unity government, at least unity in terms of the Republican Party. So I can't fault him for that. And I also can't fault him and many others who believed at the time that the country was still, still a sane place. I think things have really gone off the rails in recent years, certainly since his election and certainly since COVID to a more extreme extent. I don't think we all realized, many people, myself included, realized how power hungry, how demonic, how insane the left was and has become, and what they were willing to do to take power and to wield power in this country. I think everyone thought there was a certain level of decorum. We had our institutions, we had our constitution, we had our republic, and there were certain guidelines and norms, cultural or otherwise, that we would follow and adhere to. And a lot of those norms have been shattered. They've been shattered one after another, certainly on this campaign trail with some of the politicized persecutions and prosecutions of President Trump. So I certainly think he has learned. I think he understands the time we're living in. I think he understands the stakes better than anyone. He's on the front line facing those stakes every day, whether it's in the courtroom or just any time he goes out in public. The fear of a bullet is a certainly real fear. So I think we're living in a completely different world than we were in 15 and 16. I think he recognizes that. And I think he also has since then consolidated his control of the party. That's been revealed through the primary process, and the movement that he ushered in has only become more articulated, more sophisticated and has more sea legs, so to speak. So all of these things.
I'm with you on all of this. I certainly don't want to give anybody the impression that I fault Trump for what he did in 2016. It was magnanimous. It was the right thing to do, given what we knew and what he knew then. We had no idea of the evil arrayed against him and the people who voted for him, that they were instantly demonized as racists, as anti-Semitic, as any term you can throw at them. It's an amazing thing. I mean, I wrote a 600-page book about the Holocaust and the Nazis, and I was a journalist, wrote an article effectively saying, but I'm a secret anti-Semite for supporting Donald Trump. And I thought, this is madness. None of us have ever seen this level of madness, just crazy, throwing terms around and demonizing your opponents in an utterly irrational way. And that's why, to me, at its heart, it's a spiritual issue. This is not something that we can really make much sense of rationally. It's a level of madness that we've never seen. And I think when you saw the people shrieking, over his Supreme Court justice picks, just this, again, a level of madness that we've never seen before. And, we all hoped that we could come together. We even had Dave Chappelle on SNL. This was in 2017, saying, we need to give this guy a chance. But the dark side didn't want to give him a chance. And so they did everything they could. And they are now doubling down, demonizing anyone who's a Christian who would vote for Trump. And I don't mean a Christian meaning a Gentile. I mean any kind of a real Christian who would vote for Trump. They say, oh, you're a Christian nationalist. They're trying to smear people, trying to smear rural white voters. We've never seen anything like this in America, folks. It is horrifying, but we need to understand what we're dealing with. These people have nothing to lose. They're unhinged, and they will do absolutely anything. And we need to be aware of that in a way that we were not aware of it in 2016 and since. So I'm talking to Gavin Wax. Today's Super Tuesday. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. I'm talking to Gavin Wax. He's the head of the New York Young Republicans. Great to have you in New York City, Gavin Wax. I got to tell you, what the left is doing in America, they couldn't do it without the complicity of bums, of sellout bums like John Cornyn and others. It's an amazing thing, finally, to have the scales fall from your eyes and to realize that all these people that you thought were sort of on your side, like Senator John Cornyn from Texas and others, and to realize that they're not. They are absolutely in the pocket of, I don't know, whoever's willing to pay them. They're willing to go along with whatever wickedness that the Democrats are putting out there. Obviously, Ted Cruz is not guilty of that. Obviously, there are a number of senators and congressmen and women who are not guilty of that. But to see how many, we mentioned Nikki Haley, who are, they're really, they don't really have an American ideology. They're sort of kind of drifting along. They like the power. But John Cornyn recently, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, he dared to put himself out there to replace Mitch McConnell as the minority leader in the Senate. It just staggers me that he would be out of touch enough that he would think that people would go for that.
Well, unfortunately, the Republican delegation, the U.S. Senate, is not known for its strengths, its fortitude, it being principled. It's a body of senators that, as you described, are largely bought and paid for, sadly, and that represent a very dated version of the Republican Party. They don't represent necessarily the interests of the American people writ large, but certainly the Republican constituents in many deep red states. I always found it fascinating that sometimes our worst representatives come from some of the reddest states, the most conservative states. It just shows how low the bar has been set for many of these individuals. But listen, I welcome this new Senate leadership, battle. I saw what happened in the House, and I think we got the better end of the stick there with Speaker Johnson. Certainly an improvement. And I think politics is all about the art and the science of moving the needle marginally and on, and slowly and as feasibly as we can. I don't expect any massive sweeping changes overnight. Being in politics, when they do occur and they work in our favor, great. But the usual trend of politics is a slow, grinding march. The left understands that. That's why they play the generational game politically, and we play very cyclically in terms of the election cycle. But listen, this contest in the Senate is just part of this reshaping of the Republican Party. I think he knows, and many others know, that if they're going to take the gavel, they're going to have to make concessions to the right, make concessions to conservatives, and make concessions to the Trump America First movement if they really want to take on a leadership position. So I think that negotiating, that cajoling, that back and forth backroom deal making is going to be beneficial in the end. I mean, I don't think we could have got much worse than McConnell. So I think there's only up to go from here. Certainly, Cornyn is not my top choice, but hopefully some other contenders emerge who are much more aligned with us. And I think overall it'll be a positive development regardless of who we get.
Well, the two heroes that spring to mind in the Senate are Josh Hawley and Rand Paul. There are others, Ted Cruz. Who are some that spring to your mind who are on the right side of these issues?
Well, absolutely Hawley, certainly Rand Paul, J.D. Vance. I think these are all great senators. I'm hoping we get even more in the next, next with these elections upcoming, and we see a few more America First senators be elected. I think gentlemen like Hawley and Vance and even Rand Paul all represent are more representative of where the Republican Party is at and where it's heading. And I think they've shown themselves to be leaders and willing to speak principally on a variety of matters, from foreign policy to domestic policy. I don't see that same kind of principled leadership from a lot of the usual types and names thrown around. So I think we have some opportunity there, but I definitely think it's going to be an uphill fight. We saw the fight that happened in the House. I think this will probably be more civilized, being the Senate after all, and just the composition of that body. But still, I would hope that some of these gentlemen would put their name forward, or would at least be working to ensure concessions are made by whoever is ultimately wins this contest.
I mean, you mentioned J.D. Vance. He has become a total hero. I should have mentioned him. It seems to me that Ted Cruz is as well. Am I missing anything on Ted Cruz? Is he wobbly in any areas?
I certainly like Cruz. I think he's definitely up there in terms of his standing in the Senate with conservatives and others. I mean, I think he hasn't necessarily been as front of stage, front center of a lot of the biggest Senate fights and a lot of the biggest discussions to date. There have been some questionable things here and there, but on the whole, I think a Cruz in a leadership position would be a massive win, would be a massive move in the right direction. So certainly don't get me wrong, as it pertains to Senator Cruz, I think he'd be a massive upgrade. I will say that there is a reputation for Senator Cruz on the Hill that he's not liked by many of his colleagues. I don't hold that against him. I actually think that's a plus, but I certainly think, the animosity that he may generate from his colleagues will make, this sort of path forward for him more difficult. But who knows? Maybe we'll see a Supreme Court Justice Cruz. Maybe we'll see a Cruz moving into a different position in Senate leadership. We'll have to see.
Well, again, when you think of all the rhino bums in the Senate, the idea that Ted Cruz might not be liked, to me, that's a feather in his cap. God bless Ted Cruz. It really is. But it's interesting how there's just a handful of these heroes. We mentioned J.D. Vance, amazing. Josh Hawley, amazing. Rand Paul, amazing. Is there anybody else that springs to mind? I can't think just now.
It's not exactly a body of individuals that necessarily jump out at you in terms of their ability to be, great fighters for American principles and values. I mean, certainly there are some people whose vote records are decent, but do they have the charisma? Do they have the standing? Do they have the appeal and the image really to wage this kind of campaign to take a leadership position? That's to be determined. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I'm really hoping that the Senate gets some upgrades in the years to come. I think it's an area that we really need to grow in terms of our caucus, in terms of our strength.
I'd like the court eunuchs to throw Mitch McConnell out of the upper window. I'm going to be a Jehu. Push him down, push him out.
I have one more actual name, Roger Marshall, who was the speaker at the New York Young Republican Club's gala. He's actually been a fantastic senator on the issues, speaking from the heart. And I think he could be great. I don't know if he's at all in the running, but he's certainly a senator that I admire.
From what state? What state's he from?
From Kansas.
From Kansas. And let me ask you, we just got 10 seconds left. When does Nikki Haley finally get the memo? Does she?
I don't think she does. I think she's in it for the long haul. Unfortunately, she's being bankrolled. She's taking orders. I don't think she even cares about how this impacts her in the future. I think she's following a plan, following a set of orders, and
Yeah.
marching to the tune of the dollars.
Yeah. How sweet. Gavin Wax, great to have you back. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
I'm convinced that the American church has arrived at a significant moment of truth.
We are only 75, 80 years removed from 3 separate regimes that killed 60 to 70 million people intentionally.
The parallels with where the American church is now to where the German church stood in the face of the Nazi regime are unavoidable and grim.
Churches need to understand really what Marxism is, which is to destroy the church, to destroy the word of God.
So if you capture the seminaries, you capture the pastors, you capture the laity, you capture the soul of the world.
The church is weakening, which is why Marxism is ascendant in America today.
This is the hour of the American church.